Welcome to Writer, a program for and about writers sponsored by Florida Community College at Jacksonville. I'm Charlie Patton, and with me today is David Kaufelt, a novelist, one of the most versatile novelists I know, who lately has taken to writing mystery novels. David, you've written at least a dozen novels, probably more than that. What was the attraction of the mystery novel?
Well, you know, when I was a kid, like a lot of kids, I read the Hardy Boys.
Right.
And I always wanted to read and write about the Hardy Boys. And I always wanted to write a mystery. But over the years, I never did. But I read them all the time.
Right.
In fact, when I was in advertising, writing things like Choosy Mothers Choose Jif, get to the root of your dandruff problem, use Tenegrin shampoo, take X-Lax tonight, have a good day tomorrow. Anyway,
all of these were really yours?
Or was those mine?
Oh, great.
Oh, I was a star. I wanted to write a mystery, but I was writing other books. But I was reading mysteries, 2 or 3 a day. And I would go to my psychoanalyst. I was in heavy psychoanalysis. And one day I finally got nervous about why I was reading so many mysteries. We had nothing else to say after 7 years. And I said to this very nice, very rich man, I said, why am I reading these mysteries? Why am I so hung up on them? And he said, he never spoke to me, you know.
Psychoanalyst down.
He was a Freudian. Right. But after 7 years, usually if I asked him that question, he'd say something like, something very psychoanalytically orthodox. He'd say, why do you think you're so involved in those mysteries, David? But finally he broke down. I guess he was bored, I was bored. And he said, because you want to find out who done it, to you. And he was right. I'm not going to titillate you with that piece of information, however.
Right.
But I stopped reading mysteries 3 a day. I got down to 1 a day, 3 a week. When I'm nervous, I start reading them again. So I wrote a whole bunch of books, and I never thought I'd really write a mystery. I think all novels are mysteries, really. I mean, you want to turn the page. And I got to I'd finished American Tropic, the novel about Florida.
Right.
And it was sort of a disappointment because it didn't sell the way I had wanted it to.
Disappointment in terms of sales.
Right.
Right.
Critically, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I think it was a wonderful novel.
So I was tired, and I said, you know what I'll do? I'll toss off a mystery, 6 weeks at the most, watch. That was a 3-year project.
Right.
It took me 3 years to finish it. I had a nice title, The Fat Boy Murders. I had a nice place, this village.
Sag Harbor.
Sag Harbor, Long Island.
Right.
Sort of like Mary St. Meade.
Right.
And it took me a very long time. But I really loved doing it. Because, you know, in a novel, you can sometimes go off and then you get back. But in a mystery, every word really has to count if it's going to be successful.
Right. Technically, is a mystery easier or more difficult to write than another type of novel?
I think it's more difficult.
And
because
why
you're
is
not,
that?
well, I'm not only writing a novel, but I'm writing a mystery. You have to get, I'm not that logical a person, as you may have noticed. So you have to get the logic right. That's why I usually write a full outline.
Okay. Did I heard you talk in a seminar about the fact that you do very elaborate outline for the mystery novels. Is that something you always did with your novels, or is that a practice you developed because of the mystery novel?
Well, some novels I've done. American Tropic was fairly heavily outlined. I think it was a 300-page outline.
Right.
These are like 30-page outlines, but
Right.
it's all the mystery, because I can do character pretty well. I have to make sure my mystery is correct.
Right. Is it hard figuring out the mystery? I mean, you have to know. I mean, with another type of novel, you can begin and not know where you're going to finish.
Oh, exactly. You can end it.
With a mystery, you have to know where you're going to finish.
More or less.
Right.
And actually, in both of these books, the villain changed as I was writing it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought somebody was going to be the villain. It turned out they weren't.
Then did you have to go back and do extensive rewriting, or?
They were okay. Oh, yeah. But the publishing house was okay about it.
Right. Okay. You have a recurring character now, Wyn Lewis, who's a real estate agent and also an amateur sleuth. Will we see more of Wyn Lewis in the future?
We'll see her forever. I'm in love with her.
And what is it that you like about Wyn?
Well, she's very much like my wife, who's a realtor in Key West. If you ever want to come down and buy property.
Right.
In that she has enormous integrity.
Okay.
And as I think I say in the book, she's the kind of liberated woman who does rather than says. She's also witty and mean in her own way, like I am. I've put a lot of people into this Wyn Lewis.
Is it hard, if you had a private eye as your character, it would be easy to get the private eye into a situation where murder occurs. Now, a real estate agent shouldn't be knowing that many people that get murdered. Is that going to be a problem?
That's always the problem with these books. Right. It was like with Agatha Christie. Yeah. The whole population of Mary St. Meade was decimated. So eventually, in the new book I'm working on, The Ruthless Realtor Murders, which I kill off a bunch of realtors, I'm taking her out of Sag Harbor. There's Southampton and there's Montauk. And
so you won't have to kill everybody in Sag Harbor. Yeah. I always wondered why the television show Murder, She Wrote, why anybody ever invites Jessica Fletcher to their house. Because somebody's immediately going to die.
This is called poetic license.
Poetic license, right. Okay. So do you consider yourself now a full-time mystery novelist, or will you write in another genre again?
Well, I'm writing a book over here that's not in the genre.
Okay. Now, the nice thing about genre fiction is you have an audience that you know is there. Is that one of the attractions of the mystery novel, that there's a specified audience for it?
I didn't really think that out when I started writing the mystery. What I really like is Agatha Christie. She's one of my favorites. I love that village. I love that bumbling, mean-spirited detective. Right. And I like the fact it's sort of like Jane Austen, in that there's a lot of social comedy in this village. And I like writing social comedy, and this is one way to do it and sell it. Okay. My best reviewer said, not you, said, when the Fat Boy Murders came out, said it's Jane Austen meets Agatha Christie meets David Lynch. And that was exactly where I wanted it to be.
Right, right, okay. Talk about how you first became a writer. I know you were a graduate of the Wharton School of Business, which is the most prestigious probably business school in the country, and you were then in advertising for 7 years, as you talked about a few minutes ago. Was it always in the back of your mind that this is the wrong thing I'm doing and I want to be a novelist?
I wanted to be a writer when I was a little boy. I read Somerset Maugham. I luckily happened upon him. I wanted to tell stories. But as my dear Aunt Bessie said when I told her I want to grow up to be a writer, she said, darling, people like us don't tell stories. We read them. We're not writers. We're enablers. So I bought that, sort of. But my family was that way, too. They felt I'd never be able to make a living. And
when did you decide to write a story, finally? When did you decide that you could do it?
Well, I was in advertising, writing those commercials, bored to death. And I had all this time. You know, it doesn't take that long to come up with Choosy Mothers Choose Jeff. You're walking along, oh, there it is.
Your friends who are still in advertising are not be pleased to hear you say that.
They know.
Right, okay.
They all want to be out of it.
Right.
So I used to get there early in the morning to my office, shut the door, and I'd work on this novel. And I kind of was afraid to write the novel or to say I was doing it. I kind of wrote it like this, you know, pretending I really wasn't. But I wrote it very quickly. It was called 6 Months with an Older Woman. It was very successful. And I was caught, you know, and then I wrote the next one, and then I left advertising.
Did you have a difficulty getting that first novel published?
I thought so, but it turns out I had no difficulty. Okay. I mean, when I talk to people today and what trouble they go through, I had to go find an agent. I sent it to a few publishers, a few editors, well, there was the one agent, the famous agent, who I sent it to him, and I waited 6 months. And finally it came back, the manuscript, and it was wrapped in that wax paper my mother used to wrap my tuna fish sandwiches in. And the first 3 pages were read and nothing else. Mm-hmm. And he wrote on the cover page, Dear Mr. Kaufelt, I can't do a thing with this and neither can you. That was almost the end. I mean, that was really mean.
That would be disappointing.
He's dead now, I'm happy to say.
Okay, but you really didn't have a difficult time, you think?
I had a friend who had an agent.
Right.
She was that blonde Bronx bagel beauty of an agent, and she got the book published. She sold it to her husband.
And after 2 novels, you felt that novel writing was a lucrative enough a profession that you could leave advertising, which we all know is a lucrative profession.
It is.
Were you right?
Well, I took another job. I went to work for Henry Street Settlement on the Lower East Side. I was there for 3 days a week, working with the elderly and the poor, with the elderly poor. And then I had the rest of the time to write. And then I wrote, he said, the book that sprung me. It was called Spare Parts. It's a medical science fiction thriller.
Right.
Very much like Coma, but far better. And it came out about 2 weeks after Coma did. That was depressing. But it made me a lot of money. Okay. Riding on the tails of Coma.
And then you wrote several historical novels and multi-generational novels. I know The Wine and the Music is one of my favorites, which is set partially in Key West, but spans several generations.
You and my mother are the only 2 people who ever read that book, but I'm glad you did.
Okay.
I like it too.
Okay. And these books were successful.
Yeah.
And then suddenly things, did the business change? You've expressed that feeling.
Well, the business changed radically. I mean, there was a
Right.
time when they were giving a lot of money for what do they call middle novels,
Right.
in the hope they became big novels. Now they're not. They're giving money to, like, there's 10 people, starting with John Grisham,
Right.
ending with John Grisham, who get these great
Right.
amounts of money.
It's like the movies. It's become a blockbuster mentality in the publishing business.
There's no B books anymore.
Right. So what, in that case, then, genre becomes more attractive to a writer.
Plus, the fact I've always liked mysteries, and it does let me play with my social comedy.
Right.
I'm a great Barbara Pym fan as well, so I love that stuff.
You mentioned Agatha Christie. Who are the other mystery writers that you liked that influenced you?
Well, there's P.D. James, everybody's favorite.
Right.
And there was a whole bunch of people in the 30s, Niall Marsh. I used to love that woman who wrote about the aristocratic detective, Dorothy Sayers.
Right.
Then I found out she spent the war writing anti-Semitic propaganda for BBC, so I've dropped her.
There are obviously other subgenres of the mystery, the hard-boiled novel, which a lot of people are writing right now. Have you thought about going into other areas of the mystery genre, or are you just happy with what you're doing right now?
Well, I started out these books, I had a hard-boiled woman from Washington, D.C. doing this stuff.
Right.
And when the editor saw it, she said, "Are you out of your mind?" He said, "What do you know about these people? This is the unrealest character I've ever met." So they all suggested, my agent, my editor, my publisher, that I write about something I knew.
Which was a real estate agent.
I really know about a real estate agent.
And you know Long Island.
And I knew, well, it was always in the village. I had her come, this FBI agent came in her Jaguar to the village.
Now, the other place you know is Key West. You lived in Key West for how many years?
Maybe 20.
Maybe 20. And you're a full-time resident of Key West
These
now.
days, yeah.
Key West probably has more writers per capita living in it than any place
55.
in America. Is that good? Is it good to live among other writers?
Yeah, I think it's great. There's a lot of camaraderie and a lot of support. It's easier living among a lot of writers in Key West than it was in New York or Sag Harbor.
Why?
We were too close to the center up there. You know, every time an agent or somebody big time walked in, everybody would go like that. Down there's nobody but us, so everybody's pretty relaxed.
Are writers supportive of one another, or are they bitterly jealous of one another?
Not in Key West, it's a very different story. Most of the writers in Key West are established. Like when young kids come to me and they say, should I come to Key West and find my stuff and write a book? I always send them to Perth Amboy, New Jersey, because people get lost in Key West.
Key West is an expensive place to live.
And Key West is the most expensive city in the state.
Right, right. You're also the founder of the Key West Literary Seminar, which is one of the prestigious literary seminars in America. I've been fortunate enough to attend a few. You all do a great job. Are literary seminars a good place for an aspiring writer to go and learn about the craft?
Oh, yeah. Well, depends what kind. I don't really believe in how-to seminars.
Okay.
I recently spoke at one, and the first thing I usually say to the people who come to learn how to write is that they shouldn't be wasting their time listening to me at this seminar. They should go home and write. A lot of these people are just putting it off.
Mm-hmm.
But when you come to a literary seminar, which is not teaching you how to write, but teaching you about writing,
right,
the philosophy and the humanistic part of it, it's something else.
You get inspired and take away the
also, it's
inspiration.
wonderful to hear John Hersey, who died, when he would get up and speak, it was just, he was a wonderful man, full of integrity. And you knew where he was coming from.
Right, right. When you go, not at the Key West Literary Conference, as you say, it's not a how-to conference, it's a discuss a subject conference, and it's a wonderful conference. A lot of the conferences that you go to, obviously, are how-to conferences. What can you tell the aspiring writer?
To write.
To write.
And I tell them to read. You'd be surprised how many writers don't read. It's amazing. I don't know how they think they're going to learn.
Right.
Some writers are victims of the great Victorian romantic theory of the quill pen kind of writing. You know, only when you're inspired. It doesn't work that way. You have to sit down and write every day, and
right.
Well, even when you don't feel like it, which is 99% of the time.
Right.
If I wrote when I was inspired, I've had very little published at this point.
Right. Okay. When do you write?
Well, when I was a little boy, I heard Somerset Maugham say on the radio, even though he had a lisp, he spoke well. He said, here's how I write. Every morning I get up and I go down to my terrace on the French Riviera, and I write from 9 till 12 or so. And then I have lunch with friends, and then I relax. I said, that's what I want to do when I grow up. So that's what I do, except I'm in Key West. 9 to 12, go to... Truth is, I'm not writing when I'm at the computer. I'm writing when I'm sitting here talking to Charlie Patton or strolling around the studio.
It's going on in your head all the time?
It's all going on in the head. It's not always fun.
Right.
It would be nice to just experience the situation sometimes.
Do you write on a typewriter? Do you write on a word processor?
Oh, no. I've been writing on a word processor for 15 years.
You have?
It cost me 10 grand,
Right.
the first one. It was this big. It was incredibly hard to do, and yet it was the best investment I ever made.
And you still do that?
Not on that one.
Not on that one, right. Are you a technology freak? I mean, do you have all the new equipment and all the new...
Well, I'm online. I just got online.
Okay.
And I'm trying to find some information out. Yeah, I like doing it.
Are you up there in the internet, surfing the internet yet? Or?
I wouldn't call it surfing. I'm sort of wading through the water.
Wading through the water, okay.
It's deep up there.
Okay. Is the computer the wave of the future for all writers? I mean, can you still sit down with a legal pad and a pen and be a good writer?
I can't imagine, but I'm sure you could. You could do whatever you want.
Right.
It would just take you 30,000 times as long. The computer is really a super typewriter.
Right.
I mean, the old days when I typed on a typewriter, if I didn't like a page in a chapter, I'd say, well, I'm just going to leave it. Now there's no excuse. Cause
right. You can
even the poets are using computers.
Not so much with the mysteries, I imagine, but with some of your earlier books, you obviously did a lot of research, particularly American Tropic, which is a book, a saga of the entire history of Florida. You must have done a tremendous amount of research. Is that a fun part of the job for you? Do you miss doing the research? Do you still do research?
It's great fun. And I went to every city in Florida. I loved it. I loved the research so much that there came a point when a lot of people said, stop, write the book.
Right.
And other books like Silver Rose, I went to
Nazi
Berlin.
Germany.
Yeah, I went to Berlin for a long time. That was great fun.
Okay.
Well, I go back to this village every summer just to see what's going on. I get the newspaper, see how silly it can be. What I like to do is take situations in Key West, which I couldn't write about without getting shot, and move them up to Sag Harbor.
Right.
Characters and such.
Okay. So all the Key West gossip goes into your books, but it's not in Key West anymore.
So everybody can say, well, this sounds familiar, but it's not me.
Right. Okay. Who do you like to read?
Well, I like Agatha and all the Niall Marsh and all that.
Mystery people.
But who wrote this book? John le Carré. I think he's just wonderful. Okay. And I don't understand that. I just read a review by some famous writer putting him down or lumping him with other kind of suspense writers. He's really way above it. He's a wonderful writer.
Now, some writers are fearful of reading other novelists for fear they'll be influenced or accused of stealing ideas, or they'll run across ideas and then feel that they can't ever use an idea because they probably found it somewhere else. That apparently doesn't bother you.
No, if I could only write like Le Carré, I'd be perfectly happy.
Okay.
I'll steal his ideas anytime.
Right. Okay.
What does happen to me is, with certain characters that I want to write about, I can't know too much about them because it'll be too lifelike. Like I was going to write about this woman in the new novel, she's a lesbian, who sort of resembles a friend of mine in Key West. And then I found out that her brother had been kidnapped when she was a child and killed. And she was dumped upon by the family and made to feel very badly. She should have been the one who was kidnapped, they felt. Well, isn't that perfect for a book? I can't use that.
Yeah.
But it's great.
But if she read it, she would be hurt.
Oh, she wouldn't be hurt. She'd call her lawyer, and the litigation would start.
But you've got that little disclaimer in the front of your book. Yeah.
Doesn't count.
Yeah. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever been sued or threatened with a suit because of a character?
No, not yet.
Right.
I've lost some friends.
You've lost some friends.
Yes. In this book, in The Winter Women Murders, it takes place at a feminist seminar up in this village, and I kill off two of the great feminists writers that we know.
Okay.
Not necessarily love.
You don't identify them by name.
Well, no, but they were so close that everybody who read it before it was published said I had to go back to the drawing board, change them about.
Did you change them?
If you know them, you would know them.
If you know them, you would know them.
But they're not. It's not little. They can't sue me.
You mentioned to me earlier there's a passage in there that you would thought about reading. A passage in the Fat Boy Murders.
Yeah, I like to write villains.
Right.
I like to sexy male villains. It's one of my things. And this is an artist, and it's Wyn Lewis meets him for the first time, and she's nervous because he has a terrible reputation with women. He was wearing white painter's trousers, a forest green shirt of some soft material, and was disconcertingly barefoot. His dark hair was combed straight back. His Flat brown snake eyes were unforgiving. He had a movie star's cleft chin, and his voice was dark, deep, foreign, and penetrating. He stood looking down at Wyn from a white platform that supported a huge white silk-sheeted mattress. He came off the platform and moved toward her, and Wyn understood the wobbly reaction others had spoken about. He was a nice size. He moved beautifully. Without a wasted movement, he put the cigarette into a high-tech ashtray and took her hand. His skin was warm, almost hot, as advertised. His muddy eyes did not smile when he did. He had a pouty lower lip. His presence promised warmth and maybe comfort, and definitely something agreeably sinister. It was as if he were about to offer a new and spectacular way to go to hell with oneself.
Right.
He's great.
He is a good villain. He is a good villain.
A lot of women have asked me to fix them up with him.
Is it difficult for you to use a female protagonist in your novels?
No, I find it easy.
You do?
I've written from both points of view, but I really like writing from a woman's point of view.
Now, you said this Wyn is modeled in a lot of ways on your wife.
And other people, right. Yeah.
Does your wife offer you input on the novels? Do you seek input on the novels?
In the beginning, when we were first married or got together, she would read everything. And about the third book in, she started to feel bold. And she came downstairs. I said, "How'd you like it?" And she said, "I loved it. But on page 33, I said, 33? Are you nuts? 33 is the best page in the book. Are you So she's never, ever offered another piece of advice.
Okay. Does she still read everything?
Yes,
you
but
still let her read
she's
it just
quiet,
as long as she...
very quiet, and it's just wonderful.
Do you have anybody that you use as a sounding board?
My agent.
Your agent, okay. Only
She used to write suspense books. She used to be an editor. She's far enough away from me so that there's no conflict. I really trust her.
Does a writer need somebody to fill in that function?
Definitely. It's very important.
How do you find the right person?
Well, I think if your agent can do it, that's the one.
Right. What if
Or
you
your
don't
editor.
yet have an agent?
Well, you have to look for a friend who's not going to carve you to pieces. I mean, I'm so sensitive, even to this day, about what I write. Unless my agent tells me, or unless the editor says something. My editor is very acerbic. She loves to write these mean letters to me, but I like them. I wouldn't like to hear you tell me how awful this book is.
Right. How do you deal with that then? Do you read your reviews?
Yeah. I only remember the bad ones.
You only remember the bad ones?
That's all.
Yeah.
Once Kirkus, who usually likes my books, did a number on every book I ever wrote and asked the question at the end, why is this person still writing? I mean, it was so bad that it was clearly someone out with a scalpel to get me.
Do you gain anything by reading them, or other than just the enjoyment of torturing yourself?
Well, occasionally. Anatole Broyard at the Times once reviewed one of my books, and he gave me a very good piece of advice. Don't take the joke too far, he said. He was perfectly right. I learned that was a good one.
Okay. Young writers, should they seek out other writers, go into writers' groups, go to literary conferences, or should they just write?
I really eschew telling people to go to literary conferences, how-tos, and to seek out other writers, or go into writers' groups. And yet, some people have had wonderful success with writers' groups. Some people have found agents at these seminars. I didn't and wouldn't.
Now, do you share what you're writing with other writers in Key West?
No.
No.
Nor they, me. Right.
It's
Not that I think they're going to steal it, because everybody's writing their own stuff.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't write what Jim Hall is writing. He writes a very different kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I think we've just about run out of time, David. I'd like to thank you very much for being
Oh,
our guest.
no.
Yes.
I just got started.
Our guest has been David Kaufelt, a novelist from Key West, who's a writer of the Wyn Lewis mysteries. I'm Charlie Patton. Thank you very much for being with us.